The intercom woke me. My secretary informed me that a lady insisted on seeing me personally and urgently. I rinsed my face to wake up and headed to my private office, looking out at the city below with disdain. I despised the place and even the people working on the 17 floors below me, despite them all being my employees. My secretary Colette entered without knocking, as I was rarely there anymore. I was just a figurehead, staying in my penthouse with nowhere else to go. A young woman walked in with an air of importance but looked uneasy in the grand setting. She introduced herself as June Parsons from Slough Social Services, trying to keep things informal. She seemed out of place and unprepared for my surroundings. June explained she had a case involving 2 children and a mother who tried to take her own life, handing me a letter found next to the mother. The letter began, "My dearest John." I recognized the handwriting immediately, flashing back 11 years to when my life changed drastically. I remembered that chaotic morning vividly. A burst water main on Chiswick High Road caused a massive traffic jam, making me almost an hour and a half late. My secretary caught me sneaking into the office, scolding me for my dead phone and informing me that Tony Jordan had been trying to reach me. I didn't want to meet with him as he and his brother had no clue how to handle contracts or keep clients satisfied. Tony informed me there was a problem with the Johnson job, and I needed to fly out immediately to smooth things over with their board to prevent them from taking their business elsewhere. He was confident I could handle it as I had before. Internally, I resented Tony and his brother Robert for mismanaging the company, but I knew expressing this would risk my job. Tony demanded I catch a noon flight because Simon Johnson had retired, and his nephew Paul Johnson was now in charge. He dismissed my plans with my wife Sally for the theater, prioritizing the Johnson account over my personal life. I protested about needing to pack and my commitment to Sally, but Tony insisted, stating Sally would understand the importance of the Johnson account, which made up nearly half of our revenue. He suggested calling her to pack my things as there wasn't enough time for me to go home before the flight. I left his office reflecting on how I started working for Henry Jordan right out of college when the company was a small operation. Henry had navigated tough times during Maggie Thatcher's policies, saving the company while others went under. Henry Jordan capitalized on the surplus machinery during tough times, fixing and selling it at high prices to developing countries. A classic Tory, he likely kept profits offshore to avoid taxes. As bankruptcies declined, Henry shifted focus to becoming a middleman for companies selling machine tools in Europe, assembling and delivering machines within the EEC. The company thrived until Henry's 2 sons, Tony and Robert, joined. Despite their university education, their just-in-time approach caused delays, as they didn't account for unexpected issues in our line of work. Simple planning could have avoided these problems, but they insisted on tight schedules that often led to late deliveries and unhappy clients. Tony insisted I fly to New York to resolve the Johnson job issue, despite it being their responsibility. Knowing the board would blame me if things went wrong, I complied. I called Sally at the Slough factory to let her know. She also worked for Jordan & Sons, and I knew we'd both be in trouble if things went south. Sally and I met years ago when she joined the typing pool. We got married 4 months later and enjoyed 10 happy years together at home. Work was fine until Henry's sons took over, disrupting the company dynamics. Before their arrival, I was Henry's right-hand man, assisting him with everything. Their arrival changed things. Henry was a decent guy and didn't immediately put his sons above me, but they resented it. They were polite, but I knew they didn't like how much influence I had with their father. Henry Jordan took the company public, profiting greatly but neglecting to give me shares or a directorial role. When Henry had a heart attack, he asked me to oversee his sons, but I lacked influence without shares. Henry retired and died 3 months later, and his sons made unwelcome changes, including moving offices to Chiswick and placing Robert in charge of the factory with Sally as his secretary. I disliked Sally working for Robert, suspecting jealousy or mistrust of the brothers. Sally got along well with Robert, often defending him, which caused tension between us. As I traveled frequently for work, Robert spent more time with Sally, causing friction. Sally was upset, thinking I volunteered for the trip. She made scene, but I tried explaining the urgency, but she was frustrated with my frequent absences. Sally arrived late at the airport, causing tension. She remained distant, urging me to focus on my work. The check-in clerk then said, "You need to check your bag in now, Mr. Parsons, or it won't make it onto your flight." I quickly finished checking in the bag and looked back to find Sally, but she was gone. "How long before the flight is called?" I asked the clerk. "Probably about half an hour. I'd stay in the departure area." I dashed in the direction Sally had come from, but she must have been moving quickly because she had already disappeared. I saw the entrance to a bridge leading to the short-term parking at the end of the concourse. I was halfway across the bridge when I saw a bright yellow Lamborghini leaving the parking lot below. I could just barely make out Sally's coat through the passenger side window. I knew it was Robert Jordan driving, even though I couldn't see him. Robert never let anyone else drive his flashy car. I was furious. Robert Jordan couldn't make the trip to New York, but had time to chauffeur my wife around in his fancy car. I was seething as I went back into the terminal. I went to the bar, which was unusual for me, and ordered a drink. After sitting there and stewing for about 20 minutes, my flight was called, and I headed to the departure lounge. On the flight, I pored over the contracts, searching for the usual loopholes Henry had included to give us some leeway with delivery dates. But the latest contracts had been handled by the Jordan brothers, and most of those helpful loopholes were gone. When I landed at JFK, Paul Johnson himself was there to meet me, along with Petra, his PA, and a group of yes-men. I'd met Paul a few times before. He always seemed very young compared to me, even though I'm only about 5 years older. Usually, Simon Johnson did most of the talking, while Paul just nodded and laughed at his jokes. But Paul's overly enthusiastic welcome and his entourage of helpers carrying my bags to the waiting limo made me wary. "We've booked you into the company suite at the WA," Paul said. "Simon was hoping to meet you on this trip, but he's still on his world cruise. He asked me to let you know he'll visit you when his ship docks in Southampton." I thought it was really odd that Simon Johnson wanted to meet with me. Sure, I'd always gotten along with him. Henry Jordan and I had interacted with him many times over the years, but it was always a professional relationship. Now that he was retired, why would he want to see me? Henry Jordan always stayed at the Waldorf Astoria when he was in New York. Personally, I usually opted for less flashy places, but Paul told me the suite was the company suite, so I assumed it was just available. I couldn't picture the Jordan brothers paying for a suite just for me. After dropping me off at the Waldorf Astoria, Paul said he'd send Petra to pick me up for dinner around 7. Then he and his entourage left. The whole trip was getting more confusing by the minute. I should have been the one to invite Paul Johnson to dinner, not the other way around. It was about 4 in the afternoon local time. I wondered if Sally had gone to the play alone since she had the tickets. I called our home number, but there was no answer. Assuming it was around 9 p.m. in London, I texted her to ask if she was enjoying the play and who she went with. When Petra came to pick me up, I was still on the phone. I hadn't heard back from Sally, and there was still no answer at home. I left a message on the answering machine saying I was going out to dinner and would call her the next day. As I was about to leave, Petra took my briefcase from me and put it back where I had picked it up. "This evening is just for socializing, John. Paul wants you to meet his family. He mentioned it was a shame you didn't bring your wife along." "Petra, what's going on?" I asked her once we were in the car. I could tell Petra was thinking about how to answer my question, and it took her a moment before she spoke. "Paul thinks that since you two do so much business together, you should get to know each other better. He also wants you to meet everyone on the Johnson board." None of this made much sense to me, until I wondered if maybe Johnson and Partners were considering hiring me away from Jordan and Sons. That seemed like the only reason for all the strange behavior. The dinner was excellent, with many of Johnson's board members and their spouses present. Afterward, we went to a nightclub where some people danced. I didn't join in because I was feeling the effects of jet lag. I had been awake for several hours longer than everyone else. As the evening went on, I became more convinced that my idea about being headhunted might be right. All the board members made an effort to talk to me and make me feel comfortable. Petra stayed close, almost acting like my personal assistant. Whenever someone came up to me, she would quietly tell me who they were and any important details about them. Around 2 a.m. New York time, 7 a.m. back home, I returned to my room. There were no messages on my phone, and the hotel reception said Sally hadn't left any messages either. I considered calling her, but decided it was too early since she had been out late the night before. I was jolted awake at 11 a.m. by Petra bringing breakfast and informing me of my schedule. "You have a board meeting at noon, followed by a round of golf with Paul. We'll take a helicopter to SJ's estate right after. Paul also wants to know if you're in a hurry to get back to London." "Depends on what Paul and the board decide about our delays. I'm sure they'll be fine with whatever you say. They trust you. But hurry, you don't want to be late for the meeting." Petra seemed flustered and left hurriedly. I tried calling Sally, but found out she wasn't at her office. The temp receptionist didn't recognize my voice and didn't ask questions, but she didn't know where Sally was. On a hunch, I asked for Robert Jordan, but he wasn't in either. Frustrated, I called home with no answer. Both Sally's and Robert's mobiles were off. Upset, I called Tony Jordan at the Chiswick office, asking where Robert was, pretending I needed clarification on a contract. Tony took longer than necessary to answer. Oh, I think Robert's in Brighton meeting with the Carter's Industries directors today. He took Sally to take notes. You know how Tony's memory is. Bad move, you lying jerk. That was the contract I finalized last week. It's already completed. What are you trying to pull? That was just a thought, not something I said out loud. After Tony asked how things were going, I told him I might need a couple more days to sort things out. As soon as I hung up, I called Monty Carter's secretary in Brighton. As I suspected, she confirmed there were no meetings scheduled with Robert that day, and she didn't recall them ever meeting. Petra came back and urged me to hurry up and get ready for the conference, so I quickly finished my breakfast and jumped in the shower. We arrived a bit late, but it seemed like no one noticed. We started with a series of introductions and a tour of the offices. We didn't actually get into the conference room until nearly 1 o'clock. I have to admit, my negotiations felt like a joke. Everyone agreed with everything I said and seemed more concerned about whether I was upset. It seemed like everyone was on my side about how the Jordan brothers were useless and annoying, though no one said it directly. I thought they were planning to make me a great offer, but I was surprised when nothing came of it. After the meeting, Paul, a few other directors, and I went up to the roof to catch the helicopter. Petra, as usual, came along. She asked when I wanted to return to England and set up a flight for later that day. On the golf course, I used my mobile to call my secretary in Chiswick and told her I'd be staying a few more days, wanting everyone to think I was still out of the country. Petra overheard me and noticed my tension, expressing concern. She asked if something was wrong, noting my unease when calling England. I mentioned my suspicions about a possible issue back home, hinting at personal troubles. Petra, reassuring me of her confidentiality, offered to help keep my return a secret so I could catch them in the act if my suspicions were correct. Petra understood my urgency and promised to handle any calls from England, ensuring no one would know I was flying back that night. She assured me that besides Paul, she was the only one aware of my return and would delay anyone trying to contact me. As I was talking to Petra, I noticed Paul approaching. Petra subtly signaled him, and he changed direction to talk to the other players, allowing me to make my calls in privacy. After the game, we went into SJ's mansion for dinner, where I saw SJ's daughter, Beatrice, again. I noticed something seemed off. I'd known Bea for years, but she seemed uncomfortable around me that day. I couldn't figure out what was wrong, but I felt like they knew something I didn't. I started to worry that telling Petra about my suspicions might have been a mistake. We flew back to the company headquarters later that day in the helicopter, and then Petra took me to the airport. She had arranged for someone to pick up my things from the Waldorf Astoria. The flight back to Heathrow was smooth, but once we landed, a steward met me in the arrivals area and directed me to a service phone for an urgent call. John, it's Petra. We had everyone waiting for you on the phone last night after you left. Your wife called, and I told her you were in a meeting with Paul. Later, both Johnsons called separately, and I gave them the same message. Your wife called again, asking when you'd be home. I told her you were booked on the Saturday evening flight. Was that okay? Thanks, Petra. That should work. I'll call them from my mobile later and tell them the same thing. I appreciate your help. Stay in touch, John. I'll let you know if anyone calls here again. So my wife had called and seemed worried about where I was. I wondered why she suddenly cared so much. I booked a room at the Novotel near the airport and found that Hertz had already delivered the car I ordered from New York. Since the company had an account with Hertz, it was the easiest option, but the car was reserved under my name personally. Not feeling tired, I decided to drive by my house. Sally's car was in the driveway, and the house was dark. It was just after 4 in the morning, so this was expected. I called the house phone from the call box at the end of our street, but there was no answer, and the voicemail picked up. I called 4 times, and since no one answered, I assumed Sally wasn't home. I left the car where it was and walked to the house. After quietly entering and quickly checking the place, I confirmed it was empty. I decided the best thing to do was wait for Sally to come back. I made a pot of coffee and settled into the lounge. I had hoped the coffee would keep me awake, but it didn't. The sound of the Lamborghini's loud exhaust woke me just before 8 o'clock. From the window, I saw Sally and Robert get out of the yellow car and walk up to the house. Come in, Bobby. I'll be quick with my shower and getting dressed. Go into the kitchen and make some coffee, will you? I need something to clear my head. It was strange. Neither of them noticed me sitting in the lounge, even though the door was wide open. I guess some people just don't see what they're not expecting. Sally ran upstairs while Robert headed into the kitchen. I heard him rummaging through the cupboards and then calling out to Sally. "Where's your coffee maker, Sal?" "It's on the counter," she answered from upstairs. "I can't find it," he replied. Sally came downstairs saying, "You men are useless without a good woman around to help you," as she walked into the kitchen. "That's odd. It should be on the counter. I don't think I left it in the—" "Oh my God, what are you doing here?" Sally had come into the lounge looking for the coffee maker and finally noticed me. She was wearing just a skimpy bra and a thong, neither of which I had seen before. "I was just sitting here waiting for my so-called faithful wife to come back. Now I think I'm going to smash that slimy jerk's face in," I said, getting up from my chair. Both Robert and Sally were frozen in shock for a moment, as they thought I was still in the U.S. Then, Robert snapped out of it and tried to make a run for it. Unfortunately for him, our front door had a complicated night latch with a tricky lever. The more he yanked and pulled, the more panicked he got. I slammed him against the door and gave him a beating. It seemed like he didn't even know how to defend himself. Sally was screaming that it wasn't what it looked like and trying to pull me off Robert. I don't think I hit him as much as I wanted to. Honestly, I'm not a violent person by nature. When he tried to curl up on the floor, I stopped hitting him. I'm sure others might have kicked him while he was down, but I couldn't bring myself to do that. I turned the latch the right way, opened the door, and pushed him outside. Without really thinking, I also grabbed Sally and shoved her out. I slammed the door shut and headed to the lounge, this time going straight to the liquor cabinet. Sally knocked and rang the doorbell for a while. From the window, I saw Robert get back into his car, then come out with a travel blanket, probably to cover Sally since she was barely dressed. Sally started yelling through the mail slot, insisting that it wasn't what it seemed and begging to come back in. I refused to argue with her, so I ignored her. Some neighbors had started watching from their doors and yards. Sally must have realized I was back in the lounge, so she switched to banging on one of the lounge windows, still shouting for me to let her in. Unfortunately, she hit the window too hard. Just as the police showed up, the window shattered and Sally cut her arm badly on the glass. It felt like only moments later that paramedics and an ambulance arrived. I'm guessing the police called them. I didn't. A policeman knocked on the door and spoke briefly with Sally and Robert before approaching me, seeking my side of the situation. I explained that I had found my wife with another man in my house. The officer noted that the man claimed I had hit him, which I confirmed, adding that I hadn't struck my wife, only shown her the door. Another officer, who had been talking to Sally and Robert, indicated that neither wanted to press charges and that there was no violence involved. However, Sally had a serious cut on her arm that required stitches, and she needed clothes for the hospital. I refused to provide them, suggesting that her boyfriend could buy her some new clothes. As the Lamborghini followed the ambulance away, I mentioned that I needed to call the window repair service and my lawyer. The officers left, hoping not to return. My lawyer connected me to his colleague who handles divorces. She said she'd start the process, but couldn't do much until we knew who Sally would be using as her lawyer. It all depended on how Sally wanted to handle things. I noticed the police driving by several times that morning while I was putting Sally's clothes, which I had put in trash bags, into the garage. I figured there must have been some sort of arrangement between the police and Sally. They must have told her that I had put her things in the garage. Around 4 in the afternoon, a different police car showed up, this time with just one officer who stayed inside the car. Soon after, a Ford Transit van, driven by one of the factory guys, came down the street and backed into my driveway. I opened the garage door with the remote and saw what was happening. Sally, with her arm in a sling, got out of the passenger seat with a woman from her office. While the man and woman loaded Sally's belongings into the van, I heard Sally trying to open the service door between the garage and the kitchen. When she found it locked, she came around and rang the front doorbell. John, we need to talk. You've got it all wrong. Nothing happened between Robert and me. John, I know you're in there. Please, let's talk. You're making a huge mistake, Sally called through the mail slot. I opened the door just enough to shove her handbag into her hand and then slammed the door shut. I had already taken out her credit cards and house keys. I watched Sally talk to the police officer who had gotten out of his car. He kept shrugging and shaking his head. After a bit, he pointed to a spot on the ground, probably telling Sally and her friends where to wait, and then he came up and knocked on the door. Your wife wants to talk to you, sir. You can't keep her out of the house, he said when I opened the door. You can tell her there's nothing to discuss. The house is on the market because she decided it's no longer our home. If it were, she would have been here last night instead of with her boyfriend. Tell her to have her lawyer contact mine. She knows who they are." The officer went back to the driveway and had a brief but animated chat with Sally and her friends. Sally then seemed to collapse into the arms of her friends, who helped her back into the van. They drove off, and the officer watched as the garage door slowly closed. He shrugged at one of the neighbors who had been watching and then got back in his car and drove away. About an hour later, Petra called. I told her everything that had happened, and she expressed her sympathy. She asked what I planned to do next, and I told her I was going to divorce Sally and that I couldn't continue working for Jordan's. Petra insisted that I stay in touch with her and made me promise I would. She also mentioned that Simon Johnson would be reaching out to me and that I should keep in touch so he could find me. Paul had already mentioned this. I wondered why Simon Johnson's visit was so important. I didn't get back to the Novotel until midnight. I couldn't bear to stay in that house again. It held too many painful memories. After breakfast the next morning, I called my secretary to ask if Tony was in. She told me he wasn't coming to the office that day and asked what was going on. I explained everything to her. She was really upset by the news. I think she was crying as I spoke. She told me Tony had hinted that I might resign when I came back. She felt he stayed out of the office to avoid being there when I showed up. Tony's absence was odd. I thought he'd enjoy firing me, especially after I had a fight with his brother. Robert is one of the company's directors, and there was no love lost between us. Nothing seemed to make sense. The whole situation was confusing. First, my trip to New York. Tony had insisted I go, but when I arrived, everyone at Johnson's seemed surprised to see me. Sure, there were some late deliveries, but they didn't seem overly concerned. Then there was Robert pursuing Sally. Sure, she's attractive, but Robert usually dated younger women. Sally was at least 5 years older than him and nearly 10 years older than his typical partners. Maybe they could have fallen in love after working together so much, but I had doubts about Robert doing that. I went to the office to pick up my personal belongings. While I was there, I wiped the hard drive on both my company computer and my laptop, but only after copying everything onto zip drives. I delivered my resignation letter, which my secretary had prepared for me, directly to the personnel officer. While I waited, he arranged for my final salary and bonuses to be deposited into my bank account immediately. The accounts department was hesitant at first, but they changed their tune when they realized who was resigning. Almost everyone in the office either helped me move my things to the rental car or came out to say goodbye. I had left my company car securely locked in the garage at the house. I wanted to make sure I got everything I was owed before returning it. That was pretty much it. I stayed at the Novotel for about a week while I looked for a flat I liked. The house sold quickly because it was in a good neighborhood and I priced it to sell fast. As for work, I decided to take a few months off to think about my next steps. I was still hoping Johnson's might make me an offer, so I didn't want to commit to anything else too soon. Regarding Sally, I saw her a couple of times, and both times ended with heated arguments. Actually, both times I called her a cheating little 403 and she reacted angrily. We couldn't have a civil conversation. I was surprised she didn't move in with Robert right away. She didn't move in with him until several months after I kicked her out. I'm not sure where she stayed in the meantime, but the guy I hired to keep tabs on her said she moved in with Robert right after our first big argument at the lawyer's office. The situation was so intense they almost had to call the police. Sally probably realized there was no chance of reconciliation during that meeting. Our second big argument happened when we signed the divorce papers. Sally, who looked odd, was sitting at the table in a large winter coat and seemed uncomfortable. My lawyer and I sat across from her while the details of the settlement were read. After Sally signed the papers, they were placed in front of me. As I was about to sign, Sally asked, "John, are you really sure you want to do this? There are some things you need to—" I interrupted her, asking my lawyer, "Did I just hear a cheating, lying little 403 say something?" Sally went into a rage, calling me names, so I quickly signed the papers and left the room without saying anything else. As I've mentioned, I didn't want to get into a shouting match with her. A few weeks, maybe a month after the divorce was finalized, Petra called to let me know that Simon Johnson would be arriving in Southampton that weekend. I made plans to meet him at a hotel in town. After going through the formalities, Simon and his wife talked to me about their cruise. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was up to something. Even though he was just a longtime client, he was acting like an old friend. We exchanged condolences about Henry's death, and he expressed his regret about what had happened between Sally and me. He mentioned he was sorry he hadn't acted sooner, but had to respect Henry's wishes. This made me realize he had been avoiding the real issue. Things got clearer when B walked into the room. She greeted me with a hug and kiss on the cheek, then handed Simon a briefcase. After that, she and Simon's wife left before he opened it. "All right, John, let's get down to business," Simon said. "What did you think when Henry floated the company and didn't give you any shares?" I wasn't sure how to respond. "Well, it was his company, and he could do whatever he wanted with his money," I said. "But you helped him build it. From what I know about Henry, you probably went out of your way for him more than once." I didn't reply, thinking he'd get to the point soon. "Did you know Henry owned a large share of Johnson's through offshore holding companies? Those same companies also hold a significant portion of Jordan's shares." This was news to me, but I decided it was better to stay quiet and listen to what Simon had to say. "Tell me, what did Henry say to you when he retired? He knew his time was short." "He asked me to try to keep his boys under control, but since I wasn't on the board, there was little I could do." "Yes, I'm sorry to say this, but Henry did that on purpose. He expected the boys to ruin the company within a year and didn't want you connected to any of it. He worried they might try to blame you. You know, if a company goes under due to mismanagement, directors can be barred from holding other director positions, right? He thought the boys would drain the company's resources quickly. These papers make you the primary shareholder of those holding companies. Essentially, they now belong to you." Simon set a stack of papers on the table. "And these papers have details of all of Henry's numbered bank accounts. I was supposed to keep them until Jordan and Sons failed, but given what the brothers did to you, I think you should have them now. Did you know that according to their father's will, the brothers couldn't fire you?" "Oh, I see you didn't. I suspect they set you and Sally up to force you into resigning." He leaned back and looked at me. "You're a very wealthy man now, although your money is all in offshore accounts, so you'll need to figure out how to bring it back into the country legally. I can help with that. I have some creative accountants." My thoughts were spinning. He had just told me that Robert Jordan had seduced Sally and ruined my life just to get me out of the company. But why? You seem angry, and I understand why. Henry never really believed the boys were his. Martha had a habit of cheating on him while he was away. He had DNA tests done years ago, and, well, he thought at one point that he might be their father, even if they weren't biologically his. But he came to believe they knew he wasn't their real father, and that they talked badly about him behind his back. Henry always said you were more like a son to him, so he decided you would inherit all his money. He thought the boys would destroy the firm. I assume you want them bankrupt and broke, just like he did. But what about the employees at Jordan's? They'll lose their jobs. No, not if a big American company takes over. Do you see Henry's plan now, John? Johnson's will cancel its contracts with Jordan's in the next week or so. Then, right after that, some offshore shareholders will sell a bunch of Jordan's shares on the London Stock Exchange. That will drive the share price down. The right bank officials will be tipped off, and they'll call in the company's loans. Then, a group will come in and buy what's left of the company from the banks. You can guess who will lead that group and be the main shareholder, but no one will know that part. You'll then renegotiate the contracts with Johnson's. Maybe, eventually, you'll invite me to join your board. A merger between Johnson's and Jordan's could put you on Johnson's board as well. How does that sound, John? I don't get it. Why didn't Henry just leave the company to me from the start? He knew you'd be dealing with legal challenges to the will for years. You were with Henry almost every day during his final years, and you know he was a bit eccentric. He thought the family would claim you had too much influence over him. They also suspected he had hidden money abroad. They've spent a lot of time and money looking for it. That's why Henry left everything in my care. Anyone checking where your money comes from will find it's from me. Plus, since I'm not with Johnson and Partners anymore, they can't accuse us of insider trading. And I've been on that damn ship for the last 6 months. So here's where things stand now. I'm the joint chairman of Simon Johnson Associates. I've left Paul in charge of the American branch while I oversee operations in Europe. The Jordan brothers went bankrupt and are banned from being company directors for 10 years. They've tried to get back into business a couple of times, but I had people watching them closely. Surprisingly, Robert married Sally. I think he believed Sally might get some of the money he suspected was coming to me. But since that money officially came to me after Sally and I divorced, he didn't have a chance. Once they were married, I went to court to stop her alimony payments. After that, they got nothing from me. Their marriage didn't last more than a year. I honestly felt sorry for the twins Sally had with him. I assumed they met in the office after I kicked her out, since the person I hired to watch her said they rarely met in the evenings. I doubt Robert ever paid her child support after he left her. You wonder about these things. I kept thinking about how long Robert had been involved with Sally. She must have gotten pregnant quickly after our separation. I saw her pushing a stroller on Slough High Road just a year after I kicked her out. The last I heard of Robert, he was living somewhere in southern Spain, with the Pills Squad investigating him. Southern Spain is close to Morocco, and I'm sure he was using fast boats to get around. That's why I tipped off the Pills Squad. As for Tony, he's apparently driving buses around London. Not the best job. His wife divorced him after she found out about his affair. I'm sure you can guess who told her. And Tony's mother, Martha, now lives with him. Do I feel guilty about Martha losing her income from Jordan and Sons? Really, the question is whether Martha felt any guilt about cheating on Henry. You reap what you sow. Last I heard, Sally was living in a council flat in Slough, probably relying on social benefits. Maybe she's doing something else on the side. Sorry, that was a harsh thought, but that's how I feel. Things started moving quickly once we got going. Paul and I made a great team. We were both trained by top professionals. Henry Jordan trained me, and Simon Johnson trained Paul. Over the next few years, we acquired a lot of other companies. Merging our companies made us a large multinational corporation. Now Paul and I have stepped back and let our teams handle most of the work. Simon Johnson and his wife settled in England. He bought a nice estate right next to mine. His daughter Bea and I spend time together, but we're not planning to get married. We've both been there before. Bea is on the board with Paul, me, and Petra. We all get along well. As for Petra, she ended up marrying Paul. His wife had died in a car accident years ago. Paul and Petra got together after a lot of hesitation. Paul says Petra only married him because she was tired of waiting for me to ask her. You might wonder why I'm living alone in this penthouse. There's something missing in my life since, well, you know when. I just go day by day. If a good investment opportunity comes up, I'll take it. But there's got to be more to life than just making money. Now, a social worker just gave me a letter from Sally. I read it quickly and then used the intercom on my desk. Colette, can you find out if Beatrice is in the building and ask her to come up here as soon as possible? Yes, sir. I think she's in her office. I saw her earlier and haven't seen her leave. Bea arrived at my door a few minutes later. I handed her the letter without saying a word. As she read it, she took deep breaths, showing she was upset by what she read. That nasty, spiteful little bitch. Did you know about this? Not at all. What are you going to do? I don't have a choice here, Bea. I turned to June Parsons and asked, which hospital is Sally in? Slough General. And what's her condition? When I visited last night, they didn't have much information. She had taken a mix of pills, pretty much everything she had at home. They managed to pump her stomach, but they're unsure how long she was unconscious. The doctor said it would be a while before they know more. And the kids? I placed them with an emergency foster mother last night. She'll take care of them today. I wanted to check with you about what you want to do. Oh, I need to retrieve that note. If she doesn't survive, the coroner will need to see it. That's fine. Make a copy for me, Bea, and give the original back to Miss Parsons. Colette, get me the general manager of Slough Hospital right away. I used the intercom again. Soon the phone rang. Hello? Yes, you know who I am. I have a question for you. How much is your hospital over budget this year? All right, here's the situation. You have a patient named Sally. Sorry, June. What's Sally's last name? Sally Crawford, June Parsons replied. That was unexpected. Okay, you have a patient named Sally Crawford who's in for an overdose. If she survives, I'll send your hospital a check for £1 million. If she doesn't, you get nothing. Got it? Good. I expect no shortcuts and no expenses spared. Goodbye. Surely they're doing everything they can, Bea said. I don't trust the bureaucrats running our hospitals these days. They often try to cut costs. I just have my doubts sometimes. Anyway, offering £1 million should ensure they give Sally the best care possible. All right, now let's go pick up my kids. I assume that's why you're here, June. Well, Mrs. Crawford says in the letter that they're your children. I don't see any harm in transferring their care to you for now, but until a judge decides otherwise, they're still my responsibility. Don't worry, they'll be well taken care of, and I'll keep you updated on their status. With your permission, we'll take them to my house near Swindon. There will be plenty for them to do until we know more about Sally. We can easily drive up the motorway in an hour to visit her. I'm glad you're thinking that way, Mr. Crawford. Let's keep things as they are with John and June. I'm sure the kids will feel more comfortable if we keep things familiar. The three of us headed to the basement parking garage. Miss Parsons joined Bea and me in the back of my limo for the drive to Slough. Our first stop was the hospital to check on Sally. The doctors were hesitant to say much at this early point. June then took us to the foster home where the children were staying. B and I waited in the car while she spoke to them alone. After about 10 minutes, she signaled for me to come in, and B came along. Kay and Heather, this is your Uncle John. He'll take care of you until your mother is better, June introduced. We decided to go with the Uncle John title until we knew more about Sally's condition and how the girls would adjust to me. Hi, girls, this is my friend Beatrice. You can call her Auntie B, I said. The 10-year-olds looked at us both with some suspicion. You'll be staying with me at my country home while your mom gets better. There are horses to ride and a swimming pool there, B said. Where's our mom? Can we see her? Kay asked. Is she going to die? Heather added. The doctors are doing everything they can to help her, I said. The girls still seemed wary. We saw her earlier, but if you want, we can visit the hospital so you can see how hard they're working to make her better. They might not let the kids see her, June noted. I'm sure they'll let these children in to see their mother. Just remember the situation, I replied. We dropped June off at the station where she had left her car. Then we went to the hospital. And as I expected, the rules were adjusted to let the girls into the ICU. Surprisingly, the girls didn't cry as I had anticipated. They were quite resilient. B also noticed a strong resemblance to me. I decided to skip the DNA tests I had considered. The drive to Wiltshire was pretty calm. Once the girls got comfortable in the limo, they started exploring everything inside. They were excited by the idea of watching TV while traveling on the highway. As we exited the highway, Heather turned to me and asked, You're our dad, aren't you? I saw no reason to deny it. Yes, I am, but I didn't know until today. If I had, you would have seen me more often. We know. Mom told us last week that she never told you about us. We didn't know what she was planning, but she said she was mean to you and didn't let you know you were our dad. She said you thought her other husband was our dad, Heather explained. She was crying, Kay added. That's right. Maybe someday your mom will tell you why she did what she did. Do you think she'll get better? Kay asked. I really hope so. She doesn't want to get better. She wants to go to heaven, Heather said. I can't believe that with two wonderful kids like you, B replied. Mom's tired. She works so hard, and there's never enough money. Well, there will be enough money now, and she won't have to work anymore. See that little house? The car was entering my estate. When she's better, I'll ask your mom if she'd like to live in that house. You two will get to ride horses and swim in the pool at the big house. The girls' eyes widened as they looked at the mansion where the car had stopped. The house staff rushed down to greet them. I knew they had prepared for the girls' arrival, setting up a guest room with twin beds. B and I were kind of forgotten as the staff took care of the girls and led them away. Well, that's a surprise, B said. I wonder why she didn't tell you they were yours. Sally must have gone to great lengths to hide her pregnancy from me. Now that I think about it, she might have been showing at our last meeting when we signed the divorce papers. She was sitting hunched over in a long coat on a warm day. I remember thinking it was odd to wear such a coat. I wonder why she hated me so much. After all, she was the one who cheated. What did she expect when I found out she was with that jerk? You'll have to ask her if she survives. The kids settled in well. The staff fussed over them, and they seemed to enjoy it. Every night, I tucked them into bed and told them stories about their mom and me, stopping short of the last year. 2 weeks later, I went into the room where Sally was sleeping. She had finally woken up with her mind clear for the first time the night before. I placed the letter she had left in her hand and waited for her to wake up. I must have dozed off while waiting. The first thing I heard her say was, Hello, John, I'm sorry. I looked at her and saw she was staring at the letter in her hand. How are my girls? They're doing well. I left them at the swimming pool this morning. They're keeping my staff very busy. They're two lovely girls and a real credit to you. B will bring them here this afternoon. Thank you. I'm sorry I kept them from you. It was a foolish thing to do out of anger. Once I did it, I didn't know how to undo it. Well, I can't think of a worse way to handle it than what you chose. I was desperate. You know I owe thousands of pounds I can't repay. Robert left me with so many debts, making me sign for everything. I think he married me because being bankrupt, he couldn't get credit. You don't have any debts now, Sally. I've paid them all off. And those lenders you borrowed from are now out of business for good. Oh, you found out about them. That wasn't hard. They showed up at your apartment demanding money while one of my staff was collecting the rest of the girls' things. He told them to come back later, and they got quite a shock. They won't bother you again. Why are you being so kind to me? The last time we saw each other, that was a long time ago, Sally, and I was still hurt then. Now it's just a painful memory. Although, I was really hurt reading your letter. It'll take me a long time to forgive you for keeping my girls from me. I'm sorry, that's all I can say. Well, as far as the girls know, we're friends now. Tomorrow, if you agree, we'll move you to my house. I've arranged for a couple of nurses to care for you there. Once you're fully recovered, you and the girls can live in one of the estate houses. That way, I can see them often. You're not going to take the children away from me? I'm not going to take their mother away from them. No. They love you, maybe even more than I did. But I'll make sure you never keep them away from me again. I'm sorry, that's all I keep saying. But I truly am sorry for all the mistakes I've made. There's one question I need to ask you, Sally. Why did you get involved with that creep in the first place? Don't you think I've asked myself that question 1,000 times over the past 10 years? I'm not sure I have a clear answer. He worked on me very carefully over a long period. I know why he did it. He told me when he figured out the girls weren't his. It didn't take him long. They look so much like you. He said they couldn't fire you because of their father's will. They were convinced you had some of their father's money. They thought you might use some of it to start your own business if you lost your job. They had private detectives watching you all the time. They were really upset when you went to Southampton and met Simon Johnson. Then, a week later, the company's 4 biggest contracts, including Johnson's, were canceled. But you knew that was coming, didn't you? I think the bank seizing their assets really shocked them. They didn't expect that. Next, the police showed up at the house. Did you know Robert charged almost everything to the company? We had nothing. No house, no car, nothing. Robert and Tony were arrested for misusing company funds. But I have a feeling you were behind that. No, Sally. The law took its own course without my help. But Robert and Tony were getting outrageous salaries. What did they do with all their money? I'm not sure. They both liked to play the stock market. And Robert spent money like water in clubs. He also liked to gamble. I think they had spent it all by the time they decided to get you out of the company. They hoped you'd reveal where you thought Henry had hidden the money. You still haven't explained why you got involved with that jerk. Well, I was angry with you. Robert was very manipulative. He deceived me. Every time you were away, he'd make little comments. He let me overhear things that made me think you had girlfriends everywhere. It's hard to explain, but I'd hear him talking to Tony about expenses for nightclubs and other things. Oh, I'm sure those were legitimate expenses, but it was the little comments he'd make to Tony on the phone, which I wasn't supposed to hear but did. He'd talk about how you had a new girl in New York or Rome and how much money you spent on her. They had me convinced that you were meeting up with your girlfriends every time you went on a trip. But if you thought I was cheating on you, why didn't you confront me? Because I couldn't bring myself to believe it. If I had confronted you and you admitted it was true, what would I have done then? I wasn't as strong as you. I don't think I could have walked away and divorced you. I would have ended up miserable. But over time, I started to doubt my belief. Then that play came up. You knew I wanted you to take me to it. Well, Robert was there when you called to say you were going to New York. He heard our conversation, and since I was crying, he comforted me. Then he drove me home so I could get your bag and then to the airport. We didn't go back to work. Robert said I was too upset. We went to the river at Sunnydale and talked all afternoon. After that, he took me to dinner and to the play that night. I think I must have had too much to drink. I know it's no excuse, but that night I ended up sleeping with him. I'm sure I wouldn't have done it if I hadn't drunk so much. But it's easy to say that now. I was feeling very down, and Robert made me feel better that day. After all, my so-called loving husband had just flown off to meet his girlfriend. Or so I thought. I still believed that until Robert left me. He told me everything about how they had set it up. If you hadn't come home that day, they had photos of Robert and me together. They were going to send them to you anonymously. I knew it was wrong to sleep with Robert, and if it helps at all, he wasn't very good in bed. Too selfish. I don't want to hear that, Sally. I'm sorry, but he was bad at almost everything except hitting me. He got quite good at that toward the end. When you came back and found Robert and me together, I was angry. I'm not sure why, but I felt like you set me up. That girl told me you wouldn't be home until Sunday. That little tart, Petra. Yes, Petra. I was sure she was your girl over there. Well, she wasn't. Don't you think I realize that now? But I thought you set me up so you could catch me and divorce me. That made me really angry. Oh, I suppose I was really angry with myself. I was planning to tell you about the twins the day we signed the divorce papers. My idea was to sign the papers first and then, before you signed, let you know about the babies. This way, it wouldn't look like I was using them to get you to change your mind and take me back. You would have had the choice to sign or not. But you were still angry with me. I should have realized then that you weren't cheating on me. If you had been, you wouldn't have been so upset about my actions. Instead, you called me a terrible name and I lost my temper. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing. What's done is done and nothing can change it. Will you ever forgive me? Forgive you? That's a tough question. I might eventually forgive you, but I'll never forget. However, there are two wonderful young girls involved now, and we need to think about them. I'll be polite to you, and I expect the same from you. For the girls' sake, you're their mother, and I'll be their loving father. Just don't bring any boyfriends around my house. There will never be any boyfriends, ever. Ever is a long time, Sally. Sally eventually recovered and lived in the small house on the estate with the girls until they went to college. She passed away from cancer a few years ago. I don't think she had the strength to fight it fully. I believe the pills from her overdose caused lasting damage. Bea and I ended up getting married. Do we love each other? I don't think I love Beatrice in the same way I loved Sally. Bea and I are more like soulmates. We care for each other a lot and enjoy being together. I guess it's love, but it's different from what I had with Sally. The twins are now grown up and married with kids of their own. Bea is known as Grandma, a role she feels she's too young for. Am I happy now? It's a mix of yes and no. I wish I could have spent my life with the woman I loved. Now, all I can do is place flowers on her grave. Beatrice waits at the cemetery gate every Sunday while I do that. Life goes on.